beast called an elephant, and he decided to go and discover what manner of creature this elephant could be. They surrounded the elephant and each touched a different part to try and determine its nature. The first blind man felt the great broad side of the elephant. "This elephant is like a wall," he said. The second felt the tusk and cried, "This elephant is like a spear." The third blind man felt the long trunk and claimed the elephant was like a snake. And the fourth, feeling the leg, like a tall tree. "The elephant is like a fan," stated the fifth blind man, touching the elephant's ear. "It is like a rope," decided the sixth, holding the elephant's tail. And they were all right. It's a different thing depending on where I am, which way the wind blows or the sun shines, and upon who is looking. The story of the elephant is like something that happened to me at Private View. Not so very long ago, I was introduced by several people to several other people. This is Elizabeth. She's a performance artist. She makes sculpture, she dances, she makes artist books, and she makes beautiful things out of paper. So this afternoon, here in this library, surrounded by books, I wanted to talk about the last two things, about making books and about making things out of paper, which I hope might perhaps sometimes be a little beautiful. I wanted to read to you and write for you. I don't want to tell you about being born and growing older and studying and the techniques I use and how I do or do not promote myself. But I do want to tell you about how I love books, how they are my favourite thing, and about the colour of paper and the way it feels and the smell of it, and how opening a book is like opening a door into Wonderland, and how we can lose ourselves in a book and find ourselves, and how those things say more, I think, about what matters in my work than anything else I could tell you. And I wanted a structure for this talk, a familiar shape. So, it will take the form of a book. You can think of the elephant story as an opening quote, and this part an introduction, and we have here a table of contents. And there will be 7 chapters and several small sections of photographs with brief descriptions, like those 2 or 3 clusters of coloured plates in biographies or natural histories on shiny paper which somehow seems out of keeping with the other pages. Oh, and there will be another small amount of audience participation, but it isn't frightening, and I promise you won't have to sing. And then there'll be an opportunity for questions and a few brief appendices, and then we shall have tea. I do have to warn you that I'll be bringing several somewhat improper things into this library, which I imagine would ordinarily be frowned upon. I have already introduced an elephant into the room. Later I will be bringing in fish and chips. And I also have a terrible confession to make with regard to libraries. I have never ever and would never ever steal a book from a library or wittingly damage or deface a library book, but I do have a tendency to forget to return my borrowed books, and the fines grow and grow and grow, and I become too ashamed to take them back, and I can't renew them yet again. And so I have a pile of books that berates me, and I hope that no one here is from the library services, and if so, I'm so sorry. And although I try to take comfort in the fact that most of them are so obscure that no other reader has ever requested them, and that in a way the fine can be thought of as a donation towards keeping libraries, still I must plead guilty. Nevertheless, despite that, I have a deep reverence for libraries. They're among my favourite places. The only possible competition is a second-hand bookshop. But I love that many libraries, if not this one, are free, not a privilege but a right, open to all, every man, every woman, a guide in our most need, a repository of pleasures and of solace. Libraries feel like home, they feel sacred, they are always a place of delight. I have never not been a member of at least one library, if not more. I've clutched my magic tickets, buff-coloured and golden underneath. I grit my teeth and manage to tolerate the swipe card and self-service machines. Whenever I'm in a new place, a library is one of the buildings I look for first, and they've always been a source of inspiration. The grand temples of knowledge, and the slightly grubby and dog-eared local library, and the wonderful mobile library vans that come round on Tuesday afternoon, full of historical romance and thrillers and unlooked-for curiosities. I've studied mythical beasts and old theatres, and poisonous plants and aerodynamics, and the best recipes for Florentines, and how to stuff a dead goldfinch. They are a treasure trove, a splendid collection, a refuge, a place of adventure and solace, the beginning of infinite journeys. We can descend into the inferno or voyage to the moon and beyond. We can bundle up our belongings and our longings in a red-spotted handkerchief, step into a pea-green boat and set off to make our fortune and to see the world. We can go to Narnia and to Gormenghast and Xanadu and to Antarctica and Constantinople and to Wonderland. This is the oldest book I have. It isn't the oldest book I have because I have books that are from the 19th and 18th centuries, but it's the oldest book I have that was always my book, and it was given to me on my 7th birthday. And I can't remember whether it was my great-aunt Mary or my great-grandmother or my great-grandfather, but it begins like this. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? Indeed. We'll have some conversation later, I hope, but there's some pictures. I wonder whether, loving books and being an artist, it would be inevitable that I would make them. I remember always doing things with bits of paper as a child, folding, cutting, writing stories. This is a book cover I made when I was 9, which isn't too bad. There's a bit too much glue in the wrong places, but it isn't bad. Abracadabra. These are books I made several months ago. Not perfect yet, but improving. And in the last few years, the creation of artist books has become a more formal part of my practice. And I'm still learning, and I shall undoubtedly not make anything as skillful and beautiful as the books around us. But I do so like the folding and the stitching, the tools of the trade, the bringing together of mind and matter in a book. The writer and book artist Audrey Niffenegger asks in an essay, what does it mean to make a book? And she states 4 things. To make a book is to gain power over objects. To make a book is to create physical form for ideas. To make books is to contend with beauty. To make books is to time travel, to magically acquire the ability to be in many places at once. The Victoria and Albert Museum defines an artist's book as a book made by an artist. We could talk for a very long time about what an artist is and is not, and what a book is and is not. And I have experimented with and am interested in many different shapes and forms of book, and how they relate to the contents of a book, how the structure helps to convey the message, the meaning, to create physical form for ideas. I think, though, that a book, to be a book, has to consist of several different parts, joined or bound or gathered together, and it has to open and close, to reveal somehow its contents and share its secrets. A few pictures of some books that I've made. I might need a glamorous assistant. These boats, I made several hundred of them, and there were 7 different ones, and they're about rivers. And I folded them and left them in temporary water courses in the streets of the city. So I wandered around for 2 weeks with a basket full of boats, putting them in puddles and gutters. And it was very dry and very windy, so there wasn't any water. So one day a woman emptied out a bucket of soapy water from a bar, and one day someone spilled their drink, and one day a gentleman went down an alley. So there were various different liquids that these boats set sail on. That's in the dock. I've also very occasionally, as you can see, used books to create structural forms, exploring layering or altering of pages to convey an idea through shape. Another confession, a thing which sits uneasily with me. If I say I love books so very much, how can I have done this? I've counted and counted, and I think I've only done this 7 times. 4 times were from books rescued from a rotting shed that would have been thrown away. 2 were from a skip outside a library that would have been thrown away. 1 was a broken book given to me by a stranger in Paris that would otherwise have been thrown away. I don't know whether it's better for these books to rot in the ground or for them to be used. I'm not sure. I'm sorry and I'm ashamed. I don't think I could have done this. I hope I could have done it, not have done this, had the books not been abandoned, not been going to be thrown away, and the work clamoured to be made. I don't intend to do it again. I find other artists seemingly wanting the destruction of books very difficult, but then I've also used broken magazines and broken sheet music, albeit after musician friends have passed the books, given them their approval. With these altered books, the form is influenced by the contents of the books, but with other paperworks, it is the qualities of paper which are foremost, the ways it can be torn, cut, folded, glued, the colour, the way it stains and cockles, foxes and falls, its strength and its fragility. book was printed 99 years ago, and I found it in a second-hand bookshop in Southport. And it is a treatise for printers, stationers and others. And it's very technical and has a selection of paper samples in the back. It talks of how different kinds of plants, different wood or rags make different sorts of paper. The strongest and best papers are made from cotton or linen rag fibres. Papers made from cotton are softer than those made from linen, and the tenderest rags, such as worn muslins, are employed for blotting papers. Rags are the cast-off fabrics of the civilized world. Having served their purpose in administering to the comfort of mankind, they are sorted, graded and offered in the market for paper makers. For the manufacture of paper for banknotes, new linen cuttings are used, but this is an exceptional material for a special purpose. And it goes on in great detail. Some pictures of things made of paper. Some of you might have seen some birds I've made out of paper, and these are how they begin. I suppose they're like chicks. And then they become slightly more feathered. I find it interesting that I return again and again to natural forms, to flora and fauna, feathers, flowers. I once made a fox from a cardboard box. I tend to be pulled between nature and artifice, the woods and the city, wild things and things made. Often my work has both, a striving for both worlds, a bridge. Perhaps that is one of the reasons I like to work with old things, things that are returning to nature, why I like to use paper, hoping something natural made unnatural becomes natural again, or shaped by nature, hoping to contend with beauty. I like it that paper can be ordinary and extraordinary. I grew up with its constant presence, shopping lists on the back of envelopes, making presents from tissue paper and sugar paper, faint lines exercise books, a cardboard box for a boat. I like the familiarity of cutting and folding and sticking, paper chains and paper snowflakes and unfolding dolls, clumsy collages and potato printed wrapping paper and fans. I heard on the radio recently someone mention an outdated reliance on paper, and yet it is still with us, surrounding us. We have posters and postcards, fans and flyers, we have tickets and tissues, we have paper on our walls and paper to wrap our fish and chips in. I delight in all the different kinds of paper and their different properties and the different things they can be made of and for, the names of types and sizes, old names such as Crown Imperial, Duchess and Double Elephant. I've used new and old paper. I particularly love old paper, its stains and softness, its history. This is a collection of some old paper, an installation I made at the Blue Coat last year. I've travelled to London to buy Japanese paper as light as a feather, and I've picked up dirty scraps of paper from the street. I've used chip paper and skip-found wallpaper and marbled paper from Venice. And I've learned, and I'm still learning, how paper behaves, how it curls and creases, how it resists and surrenders. So here's the part where we have a little more audience participation. You don't have to. It's an invitation which might be declined, and it's very easy. If you accept, you'll see that as well as your fan, you have a smaller sheet of paper. For your health and safety, I have to warn you that you're at a slight risk of paper cuts. There's some plasters on the table over there. This is newsprint paper for printing newspapers, also used for wrapping fish and chips. When paper is made, it forms a web of fibres. In handmade paper, these fibres are crossed over each other randomly, but in machine paper, the process of drying the paper causes the fibres to line up in a particular direction. This is known as the grain of paper. And when making books, it is important to work with the grain when folding and gluing and binding, to not go against the grain. When I'm teaching book arts, I show students how to test the grain of various different kinds of paper. And one of the best ways is by tearing. So, if you'd like to tear your paper two different ways, lengthways and crossways, like this, hopefully, you'll see that it tears more easily one way than the other. So you should get a straighter line tearing it one way. Then you do the other way. You might have noticed this when tearing up newspaper or when tearing tissue paper. If you tear it wrongly, you get a tiny piece and then a big raggedy piece. This paper is long grain paper because the grain, the way it's easier to tear, runs down parallel to the longest side of the paper. So that's one of the ways to tear the grain of paper. And I'll relieve you of your scraps later, or you can keep them. Of writing. Keep practicing different letters until you can draw any of them freely and fairly accurately, with no pencil preparation apart from guided lines which give the height. Try not to do all this practice without a conscious interest in the beauty of the lines. There is a charm, nay, a fascination in doing well even such a small thing as the drawing of a single line. Practice, and you will add to your joys of life as well as to your ability in a very useful art. The art of lettering and layout, including illumination and book decorating, by Len A. Doost. Most of my work is three-dimensional, and I'm sometimes intimidated by a flat blank sheet of paper. I regret, one of those artists who rarely draws. I should draw more. But I write a lot. My sketchbooks are more rightly called notebooks. I write scraps of thoughts, ideas, random words, overheard words. I write a lot of lists. I write lists of strange words, or words for the colour red, or names for gin. Lovely lists to set against the tyranny of those interminable lists of Caesar's chores and too many tasks. A list. I write letters. My writing is sometimes illegible, and people have claimed to resort to a magnifying glass or just try and guess what I'm saying, which is not always what I was saying. I'm drawn to the physicality, the here, now, earthbound presence of writing. I admire the difficult discipline of calligraphy. I like the perfect pen. I like ink, black, blue, black, brown, red, quills and quink, pen and ink. Ink made from soot and from oak apples, invisible ink, scratchy nibs and cartridges. And once acquired, the simplicity and ease of writing, that we might write also with a tuned pencil, or with coloured chalks, or with paint or blood, or with a finger in breath on a window pane, or with a stick in a stretch of wet sand, shaping our meaning, shaping our words. Chapter 5 of Printing. Printing for Pleasure, John Ryder. I think I may say with reasonable certainty that you have only to get a little printer's ink on your hands to be initiated into the practice of printing, to find that the ink sinks into your veins and gives you a new approach to type and the printed page. Everything concerned with print becomes a particular interest to you. The interest stretches well beyond books and magazines and newspapers and railway tickets. It concerns handwriting and maps and engraving and lithography and posters and tombstones. Any of these sidetracks may lead you towards some particular study and be your inspiration for years to come. I've also been practicing other ways of shaping meaning, shaping words. One of the other things, apart from Alice's adventures in Wonderland and through the looking glass and what Alice found there, one of the other things I was given was a silver reed silverette typewriter, which I still have, and I also have an Imperial Good Companion, and it is, namely, and here it is. I have a small and ongoing exchange with the Case Room Press in Lincoln, and we send typed letters and are compiling a long list of wonderful things typed on a till roll. And also, over the last few years, I've been learning letterpress printing. For those of you that don't know letterpress, it's how most, if not all, of the books in this library were printed. It uses movable type, invented by Gutenberg in the 15th century, and only superseded in mid-20th century by offset lithography, and more recently by digital print. It is a very slow, painstaking, wonderful process, and it has its own rules and measures. It has its own language. One has to mind one's P's and Q's, not to get the wrong end of the stick or become out of sorts. And one of those passages new is that I'm part of a small group of artists who are setting up a new letterpress facility in Liverpool in the Blue Coat, which is processing slowly, painstakingly and wonderfully, and will hopefully open in the autumn. Chapter 6 of Words. Sometimes my work is shaped by materials or by place, but often it's made first from words, a single word or a phrase, which then becomes clothed with materials. The words within are the heart, bones, breath of it. Rarely is work untitled. The roses on that table need names to release their sweetness. Often the materials are listed, a litany, a naming of parts, ingredients for a soup or spell. I've wondered a little whether I might be asked questions later, and whether one of the questions might be, what is my favourite book? I cannot tell you which is my favourite book. Is one allowed 3 records and 8 books instead? Because there's so many. But I do love a dictionary. I have to be careful who I say that to, that one of my favourite things is reading dictionaries. A good dictionary, full, complete and unabridged. The older the better. I was asked a while ago to be part of a project called the Library of Lost Books. The Birmingham Central Library was being redeveloped, and they threw away lots of books to be pulped or burned or otherwise utterly destroyed. But an artist rescued them, and she sent one each to chosen artists to make something with, or alter, or add to, or otherwise engage with. And a parcel arrived in brown paper. And isn't brown paper lovely? And it was tied up with string, and that really is one of my favourite things to send or to receive. And isn't a brown envelope so very different? And I opened it. We're having a lovely double act here. And I opened it. Discarded. And I turned the page. Nuttall's Standard English Dictionary of the English Language. London and New York, 1886. Based on the labours of the most eminent lexicographers, comprising many thousands of new words which modern literature, science and art have called into existence and common usage, with pronunciations, etymologies, definitions, appendices of proper names, illustrations, etc., etc. Now this was last year, and I should have done whatever I'm going to do with it and sent it back by now. But it's a little like the library books. I've wanted to keep it a bit longer. I've made a small attempt at adding further intervention or slight illustrations, but half or even quarter-heartedly. What I am entranced by is the words, the new and wondrous words I have discovered in this discarded rescued treasure trove. So I've been compiling a slow list and sending them back, written on scraps of paper and wrapped up and put in an envelope and returned to sender. Tiny missives from a world of words. I thought I would read you a few of them. This is it. And it smells so lovely. Chryselephantine, partly made of gold and ivory or overlaid with them. Drossometer, an instrument for measuring the quantity of dew collected on the surface of a body during the night. Dulciloquy, a sweet or soft tone manner of speaking. Fescue, a small wire or straw used to point out letters to children when learning to read. Merry thought, the forked bone of a fowl's breast. And quiddle, to waste time in trifling employments or useless pursuits. There is something compelling about a single word, its potency, its association and command and suggestiveness. A single word, a name, hello, yes, no, regretfully, inoperable, help, spring, change, come, go, maybe, now, later, discarded, beloved. It seems as though a dictionary, a vast collection of single words, contains within it infinite possibility. All poems, all plays and puns, all rhyme and reason, all season, all songs and all stories. Chapter 7 of Stories. Fairy Tales of Hans Christian Andersen. Listen, we are beginning our story. When we arrive at the end of it, we shall, it is to be hoped, know more than we do now. Well, we began, and we are nearing the end, and we do, it is to be hoped, know at least a little more now than we did then. Once upon a time. I've read critical analyses of myths and fairy tales, and how there are only really 7 stories, or perhaps 14 or more, but I'd far rather be reading the stories themselves. They begin once upon a time, and we know how they are meant to end, but don't always. And they often feature a Jack or Jill of all trades, with bits and pieces wrapped in a hanky and tied on a stick. Although I do so love words. One of the particular things I hate about being an artist these days is the requirement to write artist statements, and have various ones, none of which I'm happy with. And as I hope to illustrate at the beginning with the tale of the blind man and the elephant, I seem to do so many different things, a jack of all trades with a bundle of bits. But I feel that one constant running through my work is that of narrative, of story, the seemingly several different parts, separate, coming together, different pages, sections, chapters, joined together, bound together with a strong thread of words. Whether I am attempting to tell a tale, or inspired by myth or by history, or by the provenance of my materials, or hoping to elicit the memories or dreams of others, there is always an element of story. When we read, we time travel. We magically acquire the ability to be in many places at once. I don't know what the books in this library hold. I suspect some of them might be rather dry and dull, that others might have stories of elephants and duchesses and aeroplanes and flying fish and artists and audiences. Stories in which we time travel, in which we set sail and discover gold and jewels, or that there's no place like home. Stories of things strange and sorrowful, curious and curiouser. Stories in which we are lost and found and lost again. And stories in which we all live happily ever after.